Hi, I'm Courtney Hitt, arts advocate and artist, and today I'm going to be teaching you about the use of gouache and acrylic and mixed media as we use and repurpose things from around the house. So to learn a little bit more about what we're going to be doing, I thought it might be helpful if I show you maybe an artist who also uses a different variety of forms of media to complete their artwork. Robert Rauschenberg, and this is his piece, Reservoir. And just to read a little bit about it, an assortment of commonplace objects is boldly displayed against a bespattered background. The clock at the upper left was set when the artist began to work on the painting. The other clock was set to record the time of completion. This combined painting illustrates Rauschenberg's method of selecting and combining groups of disparate images and objects. He did not do this in order to make social comment, but rather to break away from the traditional idea of picture space. And we are going to be working with a medium called gouache today. And let me explain to you a little bit more about what gouache is in a technical term. Gouache is an opaque watercolor, also known as body color. The pigments, or particles of color, are bound together with glue. Lighter tones are achieved by adding white. Gouache thus differs from transparent watercolor, where tone can be lightened simply by adding water. The thick texture of gouache can produce the same effects as oil paint, but it has the disadvantage of producing a final tone which, when dry, is still lighter than it appears during application. All right, so we have this pre-primed gesso canvas that's actually on the back of a piece of cardboard. So you can get this. Let me actually show you what it looks like. Any craft supply store. Amazon has it as well. This is a thicker canvas, if you will, so it definitely can absorb a few more layers. If you're doing it on a thinner type of paper, I would definitely do less layers of the gesso. And this just really acts as a primer for your canvas. This is a really great way to give any kind of art that you do a very professional and polished look at the end, and you'll see when I remove this tape. And what I've done is, this is just a painter's tape. There's a blue kind and a green kind, and I actually prefer this. And when I apply it, I'm also very careful to actually, when I rip it off, I place it on my clothing to kind of remove some of the tackiness, so that when I remove it from my artwork, it doesn't tear anything underneath. So that's just a good, another little tip. So today we'll be working primarily with a paint called gouache. I'll show you the two different brands that I have. I highly recommend the Winsor & Newton product line for gouache, and really any painting supplies. They're fantastic, and they're not expensive either. I also, whenever I work with watercolor, gouache, or acrylic, I always have two things of water here. This is kind of my clean water, and this is my rinse water. And that's also just another way, again, to kind of give your artwork another level of kind of professionalism, if you will. So we'll also be working too with some acrylic paint. Nothing fancy here. This can be found at any craft supply store or online, anywhere. A huge part of this lesson is using what you have and repurposing things. So we are going to be using the technique of mark making while we do our piece. And here I've already laid out some examples for you. You could use them all. You could use one, two, and you can use them in a various combination of ways. But these are just for you to kind of do along, if you will, at home. So, okay, great. We're going to get started. So again, this is my prime canvas. It is completely dry. That's very important. You are going to be working with paints here that do have some water. So definitely be cognizant of that, because the more layers that you put, right, the wetter it becomes and the more it will seep into this. So being a little bit delicate is important. I also have a rag here. Actually, off to my side, I have a few. Paper towels will suffice. Very important that you have something like this. After you dip your brush into the clean water, you will want to rinse it off. So I've taken the liberty of just pre-mixing a few paints here. These aren't the final colors that I am going to settle on necessarily, but it gave me a good place to start. So one of the things that I do sometimes when I first start thinking about what kind of piece of art I'm going to work on is sometimes I might look at a color wheel, or I might look at color palettes online, or I might even look at photos and take from them colors that I like, ideas. You know, I think when you're working on a piece like this, it's really nice to just kind of have some kind of reference point. It's just helpful. And also too, it helps to make sure that your colors, right, are cohesive. I'm just rinsing my brush again because I don't think it was as clean as I had hoped. And you don't have to have expensive, fancy brushes by any means at all, especially with this type of work. I mean, we're painting on cardboard here. It's kind of like a DIY canvas, but all of us have these kinds of things hanging around. So I'm just gonna start placing color in random spots. As you can see, this is a little bit thinner than I would like, because we'll be here all day if I'm sitting here doing this layer by layer. So I'm gonna thicken this up a little bit. The unique thing about gouache is you don't need, and I am using a different color blue here, just FYI, is you don't need to add a lot of water. And it's different than watercolor because it's much more opaque. Usually I wouldn't use this type of brush to mix my paints. And it dries a lot faster than watercolor, which is nice. You can see how bright and vivid that blue really is. It's very, very, very vivid. So I'm just gonna rinse a little bit, and I'm gonna splash the same color blue in various other spots around the painting. And there's no rhyme or reason here. Really, we're building a piece of art here. And of course, at this point too, if you want to mix up your brushes, and I will go ahead and do that. I'm gonna switch back to a smaller brush. This is, you know, I'm not sure because it's very well loved and used, but it's on the smaller side. You know, when I first started this, I heard or would read and things like that from different artists that said, you know, the one thing that you don't have to invest a ton of money in are your brushes. And some of the best brushes that you'll have are gonna be some of the ones that you use the most. So I'm gonna splash some more. Usually you wanna work from light to dark. So I will kind of build the piece with that in mind. There are certain artistic principles I feel like that just really always apply. And we will just be building layers of different color underneath. Actually, you know what? Let's go for a different brush size here. So we can cover some more area. I'm gonna go for this bright, it's almost like a construction color orange. And as you can see, that almost looks like it's going on like in acrylic. And that's just because of the amount of water that I added. Or didn't add, I guess, is really the better way to say that. And at this point, there's really no way to make mistakes, you guys. We're just putting color in certain areas. And you know what? There are certain spots of this that we're just gonna cover up completely. So if you mess up, it doesn't matter. Just keep going. Or as Bob Ross would say, they're just happy accidents, which I think is fitting. Now, I will say there are some techniques that I use when I do the very first layer or the very first few layers. Just kind of, you know, artistic principles, I guess, really more so, if you will. I do like to kind of put a bright color to kind of focus your eye inward, not necessarily in the center, but at one, you know, a certain point in the piece. And definitely I like to work with a color wheel in mind because it just helps you build your piece with kind of complementary colors and to make sure that just everything kind of goes together. So my color palette has this green in it right now. It's a beautiful green, but I don't think it's the right shade of green for this particular piece. So I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna just drag in some of this blue, and I might drag in some of this yellow too. This is also a good way as well to make sure that your piece is kind of cohesive. When you drag in some of those same colors, it helps. It helps keep that tone and that similarity. That's a much better green. I like that green. It's more of like a deeper jewel tone green. So what I'm gonna do is, because I used this brush to mix, I'm gonna just rinse it out. It really is nice to start with a clean brush, and by that I mean well rinsed. Okay, so I'm rinsing it in the dirt. This is my dirty cup. Okay, wiping it off on the towel or paper towel that you have. And art's messy, you guys. You see I have paint all over me, and that's characteristic of any artist, I think. Okay, so I dipped it in the dirty water. I wiped it off on my towel or paper towel. Now I'm gonna place it in my clean water and wipe the bristles off on the edge. I'm gonna dab it a little bit more. I'm gonna dab it once more. This may seem like overkill, and I get it. I'm gonna swipe through here and mix the paint just a little bit more. And then I'm gonna start placing it on other areas. And if they overlap, if they smear together, no big deal. Because like I said, this is the point of where we're doing the very foundation layer to build our piece. And what's kind of great about this is you can make this as difficult, as intricate, as detailed, or not as you want. And you'll see as we go further along what I mean by that. And the gouache, which is the layer underneath, really acts as just a great surface. It brings out the vivid colors as well. In fact, if you want, just for fun, you can just try this without a canvas or cardboard or what have you that's gesso primed, and one with and one without, and see if you notice the difference. And I guarantee you will, because you will see that the colors turn out more vividly when they have this primer underneath. So no matter what you're painting on, if you have the ability to do it, you really should. It just really polishes your piece. So I have just placed some purple gouache in here. I haven't added any water to it, but I will show you how much water I add. And it's not a lot, okay? It's like 2 little drops, because I want this to be pretty thick and opaque. And rinsing into my dirty water. And these are just old jars that I've used. You know, this whole lesson, right, is a lot about repurposing things. And, you know, what better way to demonstrate that than by bringing some of the things that I use at home, which are just old jars. They're great. They're great to store your paintbrushes in. They're great to use, right, as these little water decanters. And in fact, I even store my paint in them. So don't throw anything out because, you know, you could reuse it. You can even use the lid to do some printmaking, and I will show you some of those types of examples later on. And that's a pretty vivid purple. I can tell by the way that it's going on that it's a little thick, so I'm just going to add a little drop. I'm going to use some of the dirty water since it's already a really dark color. However, I would not be doing that with the lighter colors. Some shortcuts are okay, I think. So I'm still building my piece here. And depending on the size of your canvas, that will definitely depend on what size brushes you may want to use. I'm using some big ones right now, obviously, because I'm covering a really large space. But if you cut this cardboard down significantly and you did like a postcard size, you could use a very small brush like this, which is a 4. That's all what you're comfortable with. This size brush is actually one of my favorites. I've kind of found over time that artists kind of will tend to stick to certain brush sizes, regardless of what kind of piece that they're working on. And this just happens to be one of my favorites. And I like a round brush typically. And as we go on, I can add more of the same colors. So let's definitely, you know, I like this orange. So I'm gonna swipe that again somewhere. And like I said, there's nothing that you can do wrong here because this is just the surface layer. We're still on some orange, let's brush them right here. Now what's great about this is you can go into this type of a piece not really having any idea of necessarily what it's going to look like. But if you follow certain kind of principles and ideas, you can just hope and pray that they're going to work out well. So I'm gonna maybe mix a few more colors, and I may just do that again by adding more of another color to another color. So I think I'm actually going to drag some of this orange into this yellow. And if you want, you could keep it really simple. I don't like simple. I like really complex. I like a lot of color. I like a lot of intricacy, and that's me. If you're somebody, well, you know, let's say you're doing this with, you know, you have a friend in mind, or you have a room that you're going to put this in. You know, definitely consider the environment, the color scheme already, or the interests, or, you know, of the person, what they normally wear, things like that. And that kind of helps you, like I said, just having some kind of color palette, just idea in the back of your mind. Okay, so these colors are great, but I feel like it needs something else. You know, I think maybe a lighter green. And you know, I may be able to just mix this green in with this blue here. Let's see what we get. Now this paint actually, let's see. Paints tend to settle over time, and they do need to be shaken out. It's just much harder to do in a tube like this. Okay, and I'm gonna change my brush size again. I'm gonna dip into the clean water. Like I said, I like a lot of variety. I like complexity. I like a lot of difference. But use what you have. You know, if you have pre-mixed paints or acrylic paints, you can use those. You do not have to use these. Okay, and I like this green a lot. Dip it in the dirty water. Into the clean water. Into the color. Let's wouldn't say it's totally different than the other one, so I may drag some more. Let's drag some more into it. It's important you mix, 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 mix. The smaller brushes, at least when you're mixing like in a palette like this, make it easier. I'm still going to dip that with water. And this would be what I would be doing too if I were using watercolor, which should be a little bit more difficult to use just entirely on this type of a surface, but it could be done. But since gouache has less water, it's more opaque, it does a better job. So at this point, if you want to start overlaying some of the colors, you can. Or overlapping, I guess I should say. And just kind of, you know, see what it looks like. Let it do its thing. I'm going to drag a little bit of dark in here. There are definitely colors that I like to stick to. So I've tried to kind of go out of my way to kind of branch out, so to speak. And you can build this however you want. As many layers as you want, or as few. I kind of like sometimes the effect that it gives when there's a little bit of too much water in there. And you'll see how it dries, actually kind of interesting too. I think I'm gonna switch to a bigger brush after I mix. Let's see. I'm gonna go with a primary red. And as you can see, this one comes out better. But when you're just playing around, right, you're not gonna go out by the most expensive thing. Mix. This is a very, very, very vivid red. But I'm gonna swatch it on there anyway. So like I said, there's some areas I want to highlight over others. You know, I was going to switch back to the big one. Cover some more area. Super important that you rinse your brushes out. And as you can tell, I did not do a very good job with rinsing this one out. Some up here. I don't quite want it to blend with that green though, so we're just gonna leave that there. Let's see. You know what? I want some here. Kind of like that. Yeah, you see that really cool, kind of crackly, almost like effect. I personally love it. If you're not all about it, you know, then don't add so much water. As you see, like that is going on a little bit thicker. It's just really up to you. And you can always test your stuff out ahead of time. So, you know, just cut off a little tiny piece of cardboard and just kind of play around and just kind of see what colors might look good. Really, honestly, what's great about this style of art is it lends itself to, you know, little mistakes. So that's okay. Nothing has to be perfect. And you can always cover it up. And you can see I kind of, intentionally or not, blended those two colors together, but it looks cool. If you don't like it, cover it up. If you love it, highlight it. And there are all kinds of ways to do that, and we will go through those too. Okay. I think I'm going to add maybe a smidge more bright yellow to this. I feel like I need a little bit of bright, not so much like a goldenrod yellow in this piece. And I am gonna use, use the small So I'm dipping it into the clean water before I dip it in here to mix so that we're not tainting the color, so to speak. And this really, you have to work at mixing this. This is not, I mean, you can see it sticks to the bristles on my brush. I have to work it back down. I really need to scrape the edges. You really got to work at mixing these paints together. In a thing like this, right, if the colors don't match, it won't make a difference. But if you are doing a different piece of artwork where that attention to detail is important, it will be very noticeable. Plus, if you just get in the habit of doing the techniques correctly and like a professional, you know, it just makes for a better outcome in your artwork. And technique is important too. Okay. I'm gonna actually, even though I just mixed it, I'm gonna mix it up again with this big brush. And let's see how thick or thin it goes on. There we go. I kind of like this streaky effect right there. So I'm gonna let that be. And then I'm just gonna plop this down some other places. Now at this point, you can keep working with the colors that you have, and there's nothing wrong with that, or you can continue to just make like little tweaks here and there. And you can also, because this is a very abstract style of piece, we can also just always turn it. So this is a very wet area, so this makes it a little bit easier for me to work with. And let me see what colors I want to use next. I feel like I need a little bit of a lighter green maybe. So I'll start with brighter yellow. Just a smidge of green, so I can pull from either of these palettes. I like this green. This reminds me of almost like a chalkboard back in the day, that color green. I love it. Yes, that's much more what I was going for. I'm an artist that loves color. I'm a person who loves color, and I love surrounding myself with color. So when I do artwork, I say the more color, the better. But again, if you have just a few colors that you just absolutely love, that you only want to work with, that's okay too. You don't have to have a very complex color palette. So I'm dipping it back into the clean water because I am going to drop some of the clean water in there before I mix it. Actually, use a small brush to mix again. That's almost like an avocado-y, like neon green. I love it. Okay. Let's pop this in my dirty water. I'm gonna rinse my brush into my clean water. And again, I flipped the piece just because for me, it's made it easier to work with. Actually, when I do a lot of these style of pieces of art, funny enough, I make them so that they can be hung in any direction and that they kind of make sense. You don't have to work like that. It's just kind of something fun that I do. I'm just coming in and dropping this in different places. Let's see how it looks swatched on that. There you go. And we can actually, at this point, just make smaller kind of swatches here and there since we've already covered most of our canvas up. I'm looking to see which areas are still wet or dry so that I'm cognizant of where I place my brush, because I may not want those colors to be blended. So I think I want this color here. So I like it with this green, and I am gonna blend it up, I think, like that. And you know, sometimes you'll love these effects, and then you'll find yourself covering them up. So it's just kind of interesting to see how a piece kind of builds. Drop it over here and kind of a bigger splotchier kind of effect. And if it's too much, which I think it just might be a little too wet for me, you can take a dry brush and sop some of it up. Like I said, this piece does not have to be totally precise, so it doesn't matter. And I'm just going to place that into my dirty water. And I think I'm gonna work some more of the purple. But I want a lighter purple, so I am going to add some white. Definitely gonna need some water there. Now you can absolutely wait in between layers to dry to paint if you don't want this particular style of effect. To me, I think the biggest pain is honestly just mixing and preparing the paints. And I think honestly that was probably one of the hardest things for me to master as a beginning artist, was kind of the principles of, you know, paint mixing. And you know, you really have to really understand color and how they work in concert together, right, to build the particular color it is that you're going for. It is a skill. I like this lilac-y color. I'm just gonna splotch it in different areas after I get it clean. And I've already made a mess, of course. Like I said, art's messy, but that's okay. Mixing it again, and I am going to drop it. Get here over this yellow. And just in random spots wherever you see fit. And I will start rotating my piece as I work, because it just makes it easier to do. I really like the way that these colors are balanced together. I think they really stand out. Okay, I'm gonna do a little bit here. As you can see, that's a little bit more opaque. Some of my other strokes. And like I said, you're just layering. So where you put the color right now, and I pulled up some of this red, but that's okay, is not necessarily where it will stay. And now I can go back in and use some of the earlier colors again, because we're just layering until we have all of those white spaces up, out at least. Now I'm just kind of going in and filling in some of those white spaces, or just areas where I want to see more color. I'm not really a fan of that particular green, so I'm going to go and mix this one. I just feel like it's not giving me the consistency that I really like. I may brighten this up a little bit though. I'm going to pull some of this yellow in here. Just because at this point I want a different shade of green. Again, it's better to mix with your smaller brush. And if you don't like where something is, like I said, don't worry, because you can clear it up, clean it up later. And this would be a good spot to wait for it to dry just a little bit before you do the next layer. So through the magic of television, this is now mostly dry. So we can add some more layers. At this point, I will probably start using some acrylic, since this is a mixed media piece. However, feel free to continue to use gouache, continue to use acrylic if that's what you have. Use what you have. And I particularly like sometimes just throwing the paint on the canvas, not literally throwing, but throwing the paint on the canvas. Because this isn't a piece that has to be too particular, right? Or precise is what I really should have said. So I'm just gonna plop some here, and why not some there? These, I probably will end up using this big brush, so let's rinse it out. Clean water. Okay. Now, of course, the thicker that you put it on here, the longer it will take to dry. I really like that blue over that orange. It looks really cool. Let's put some of that here too. It's really funny when you first start doing this, you just think, there is no way that this is ever going to turn into something, especially a piece of art. But as you go on, you will see. So let me go through. It's okay, happy accidents, happy accidents. Okay. I like this blue a lot, but I also really like this turquoise color. And I have very little of it, but again, use what you have. So I wanted to use it up since I have just a little bit left. Okay. And however you want to layer your favorite colors or work your favorite colors into your art, you should. So I'm actually just gonna do just a few little areas for now. Because like I said, we're still building. And I just wanted to use the little bit last of this paint just to demonstrate that I really do use everything. Streak right there, I think. And some of these blue here. Just kind of gonna go around again and look at some of the spaces that I don't have filled. Now again, I'm having to dip my brush all the way in to get that little bit last paint. If you're not somebody who likes to get messy, you're probably not gonna enjoy doing that part. And I'm just staying away from that green because it's still wet. And I don't want those colors to blend yet. I do think I want to splash a bit here. I like that. I think I want to splash of it around here too. I feel like I need a little bit in the corner. And now we're just kind of going around and just putting colors wherever we feel like it. To just, again, we're still building our piece. Another one that I don't have a lot of in this is this coral color. So it's great if you can have a safe place to store them upside down like that, so that when you do go to use them, if there is just a tiny bit left, it's much easier. And again, I'm actually not opening my paint over my piece because you will notice that some of these small pieces do fall off, and they will get in your piece and they will stick to your piece. And again, we switch, so we're using acrylic now. But again, use what you want or switch if you want. Really good. Built in here. Here. And it's actually okay at this point if you want to start working with some of these different mark making techniques and patterns and styles and designs, you can go ahead and do that. However, at this point, they might get covered up, so you may want to wait. But it's your piece of art, and you can do as you wish. Building. See some of the white there. So I'm just going to build that up. Just trying to use every little bit, last bit of paint that I can, because waste not, want not. I like this crackly effect here, so I'm gonna leave that. I am gonna pull in some of this peach. I'm also paying close attention to the borders in my pieces to make sure that I'm getting all of the edges. And again, we can rotate it because it helps us to work, but also too, so we can see it from a different perspective. I think it always helps, right, when we can see things from a different perspective. It's going in. I want to fill in some of this. I like the pink with the green a lot, so I might build some streaks in there. And again, it's extra messy because we're trying to get all that little bit last bit. I think we've built a pretty great layer that we can start using some of the fun things that we have to do some of our mark making. And if you see anything else as you go along, you can always make changes. This canvas is now relatively dry, and I'm pretty happy with how it's turned out. So I'm not going to add any more layers to it other than some of these mark making techniques that I have right here. So in the interest of using things that we have around us to do art, here are some little items that I've kind of come up with that would make interesting patterns or shapes in the artwork. A little planter, a little bottle cap, some toothpicks, Q-tips, bottle tabs. I even took this fork and took this twine and braided it around. I think it'll give it some really cool stamping patterns. A bottle cap, a water bottle, and some of these drink stirs. Again, use what you have. Okay, so I'm gonna leave these out here for reference for you, and of course I'm gonna reference them myself. So I'm gonna use a long and thin brush, and this is a number 2. I am still working with acrylic. You don't need to dip it in water. I only do because it gets the brush to a point that I like working with. And I kind of just dip it off or wipe it off into my towel. And I've already mixed some colors here. So at this point, you can use some of the objects that you've found from around the house to complete your artwork, or you could do a mixture of both. I'm gonna go in and just do some kind of funky designs here, of course, using some of our mark making patterns and techniques that we have in front of us. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It can just be totally random, however you want, no rhyme or reason. This to me is where it really gets fun. And now let's go ahead and let's try some of these. Now I would suggest if you have a particular vision for how you want this to look, don't just dip it in here and put it on your piece of artwork. Put it on a different one and test it out and make sure it is giving the effect that you intend for your piece of art. I'm going to dip it into this olive green color. Let's just see what happens. Ooh, I do like that. Let me make sure that they're all okay. They almost look like a little paw print. If you like that effect, do it some more. Like I said, what I find to be fun about this is the intricacy, the detail. I find it interesting and honestly a compliment when someone looks at my art and they say, you know, I see something different every time I look at it. To me, that gives just a, just such a satisfying feeling, really. So I'm just doing little clusters of them because I actually really like the way this looks. And I probably will use the other end in a different color. So I'm going to set that aside for now. Let's see. You know, I think I'm going to do something interesting. I brought this brush that's messed up. It should be in the trash. I wanted to show you so we can kind of play with it and kind of see what kind of a cool effect that this might give. I think I'm going to actually bring some white in here. And this is acrylic as well, still working with acrylic. And I think I'm gonna drag some of this green into it. Okay, mix it up. I think I still want some more. Mix it more. too light for my taste. Some more green. Okay. This is a very interesting frosty kind of green, like a seafoam green, but I do like it. So I'm going to take this brush, like I said, that's really meant for the trash here. The bristles have kind of been bent and it's just all out of shape. And I'm just going to dip it in here and just place it random spots to give it. I really like that. And by using a lighter color, you can see it really, really stands out. So see, sometimes that's why you don't throw away your old brushes, because you may be able to use them for something like this. I may go back and add more. I may not, actually. I just felt inclined to put one there. So I'm going to set this aside for now. I really do like the effect that that gave, and I hope that you do too. I'm also going to go ahead and just try this bottle cap. Let's see what that does. Let's do it in the same seafoamy green color. Why not? So you can roll it like this, and it leaves an interesting pattern. I do like that. See, I'm just dipping it into the paint and just kind of rolling it. I think I want to use a different color. I'm going to try it with this bottle and see how that works. Now, the more paint that you use, the less of that kind of track kind of effect you'll get. What else can we do? Actually, one of my favorite things to use are these drink stirrers, but it helps if you put the paint on it first. You can put it on the canvas and then kind of, move it around with a stick. That's definitely something you can do. You can also put the paint on a plate. That helps a lot. And then you can just drag this through. So like I said, just use what you have. Go through your recycling. See what you can reuse and what you can repurpose. These leave these really cool lines. These are super fun. And this would be something too. You could do this piece in collaboration with somebody else. This is definitely the type of art that would lend itself to doing it with somebody else. Think about it. You and your family could build the next really awesome, beautiful piece of artwork that hangs in your home, and who wouldn't love that? Okay, so I've used a lot of the found objects, but I want some more detail. So I'm going to start choosing from some of these types of designs and actually paint them with my paintbrush. I really am feeling a lot of these arches for some reason, and that might be because this is a very colorful kind of rainbowy type print. That's also just a shape I'm a fan of, so I think I'm going to start with that. I'm going to use some of just this straight green. I'm going to find spots I think are good to think quite yet, but I want to. And these are kind of just a little hidden, at least over in that part of the painting. So I'm going to move some over here. Okay, it's a little bit streaky. It's okay. You can always go back and fix it. And you could even turn it to the side and work that way. And like I said, I oftentimes do, let's go for a big brush this time, because I like to be able to hang my artwork from any way and it still be displayed. I have some of this neon pink. I love pink and I love color, so I figure out a way to use both whenever I can. This brush is a little bent, So I'm going to just dip it into my water. Again, it helps keep that desired shape, that point. And as you can see, my hands are already just covered in paint, but I think that means I'm just really doing a good job. So I'm not quite sure. You know what? I think I like some of these triangles. And you know what? This brush isn't quite giving me the effect that I was hoping, so I'm just going to switch it out. I'm going to go for a smaller one. And this is a 4. Again, I'm going to dip it in the water and then rinse it out. Dip it back into this neon pink that I love. I'm just going to kind of randomly start placing it. You know, I like the triangles, but I also really like some polka dots. So I think they would show up really well on this blue. So I'm gonna just drop some really pretty bright polka dots. And like I said earlier, it really helps to have a focus to your piece. It doesn't have to be the center of the artwork. It could be anywhere, but just having some place that your eyes are drawn to really is aesthetically pleasing. As I said earlier, it really is as intricate and as complex as you want to make it. You could cover this whole thing in patterns and dots if you wanted to. And again, I'm going to turn as I work. It also just helps because I'm moving and working on the dry surfaces of the paint. And these kind of look like hearts, which I think is cute too. Look for some bigger border dots. And kind of use them to kind of draw your eye into the area I'm intending. It's funny, sometimes I get so mixed up in these pieces because I'm just constantly turning them around like this that I don't always remember where I started, you know, which way was the top and which way was the bottom. Which I just find that to just be so funny. Everybody has their own process. And it's just mine. Let's see, what other shapes could we use that would be good in here? I do like some of these bigger circles, these more contained circles. I'm not crazy about using the pink, I've already used it, so I'm going to put a few in here. But then I'm going to switch to a different color. Let's do some olive green. I'm just doing these little kind of hash marks. You can do them horizontally or vertically. There really has to be no method to your madness here. It's just really whatever you think looks good. And I really like the way this looks. I might just go in and add just a few little, because I just never think you can have enough of anything. Maybe some drips or some splashes, very Jackson Pollock-like here. And if you don't like necessarily how some of those look, you can just go through. Let's see, one I'm not crazy about. Let's see, Just kind of smear some of it. And you can even take your stir, or we can actually go ahead and use this and we can see what kind of effect that gives. I've actually put some of the paint on here. Let's see if that gives it a little bit. Well, you don't know till you try. It's definitely giving it some kind of texture appearance. We already had the paint on there, so you might as well use it. I think it looks pretty close to done. I may add just a few more little accents here and there, but I'm actually pretty proud overall of how it's turned out. I'm actually going to use just this clean bit of space on my palette because I have it. And I'm going to use a small brush. I think I'm going to use this one. I'm going to dip it in my clean water. I'm going to grab some of the white and I'm just going to highlight a few areas. And after you get done with this, you may take a look at it and realize, you know what, I fussed with it too much. And that's honestly something usually I struggle with. Or you may realize, as my brush kind of falls apart here, you may realize that, oh, wait, I really should have went in there and I should have added this. Or, oh, I really like this particular mark making technique. But the beauty of this is we are painting, again, on cardboard, which is still so hard for me to believe. And it's accessible, it's easy. We all have cardboard lying around, right? So it just makes a wonderful canvas. Maybe a few more little triangle arrow effect shapes. They don't have to be perfect. And we'll flip it around and look at it that way. And I'm going to add just a few more and then we'll be done. I really hope that you enjoyed learning the technique and the medium of gouache. And I hope you too find creative ways to repurpose the things in your life to make beautiful works of art. Go ahead so you guys can see. You would normally want this to be completely dry before you remove the tape. But doing this edge really gives your art a really polished and finished look that I think you'll really appreciate. You still want to be delicate when you remove the tape, of course. I have damaged pieces of artwork by not being delicate enough. And there's nothing more frustrating, right, than spending all of this time and effort into building this beautiful masterpiece only to have it ruined when you remove the tape that was supposed to protect it, right? And again, like I said, before I put the painter's tape on here, I do adhere it to my clothing once, twice, sometimes 3 times to remove some of the tackiness so that it's not too sticky. And you see that really crisp, clean line and edge that it gives the work. And this is a technique that I do on anything, canvas, sketchbooks. It really just makes it look so much neater. And you will see, once I remove this last piece, delicately, as I tend to get antsy myself, and it's still wet. And of course, after you've removed this, if there are areas that you want to go and clean up with scissors, you definitely can. It doesn't need to be perfect when you start. And believe it or not, there is your very own piece of artwork on repurposed, recycled.